18,000 feet beneath the Indian Ocean's surface, the USS Edsall has waited in crushing darkness, a silent witness to one of World War II's most extraordinary naval engagements. 200 American souls vanished here on March 1, 1942, after performing what enemies called the dancing mouse maneuvers. Against impossible odds, over 1,000 Japanese shells, 26 elite dive bombers, an entire strike force designed for annihilation. This single destroyer twisted through a 3-hour ballet of survival that left seasoned enemy pilots stunned. The Japanese themselves bestowed the ultimate tribute. She moves like a dancing mouse. It was the only nickname they ever gave an American vessel they had fought. Then, in November 2024, cutting-edge sonar technology shattered 8 decades of silence. The wreckage emerged from the abyss with its hull scarred but intact, its secrets finally ready to surface. But the discovery raises questions that challenge naval warfare itself. How did one ship execute maneuvers that physics said were impossible? What drove her captain to dance with death for 3 hours? And why did the enemy honor the very vessel they had destroyed? By early 1942, the Imperial Japanese Navy had accomplished the unthinkable, conquering more ocean territory in 4 months than any naval force in human history. Pearl Harbor lay crippled, the Philippines were falling, and the American, British, Dutch, Australian command was collapsing under the weight of Japanese aerial superiority and naval dominance. The juggernaut seemed unstoppable. Singapore had fallen. The Dutch East Indies were crumbling. And by late February, Christmas Island stood as the last Allied outpost in the Indian Ocean, the final domino before Australia itself would be threatened. Into this strategic nightmare sailed USS Edsall, a vessel never designed for the burden history was about to place upon her steel shoulders. The Edsall was a Clemson-class destroyer, 271 feet of World War I-era engineering, commissioned in 1920 when naval warfare was still dominated by battleships and dreadnoughts. With a top speed of 35 knots when new, by 1942 she could barely manage 26 knots due to her age and recent battle damage. Her armament was modest: 4 4-inch guns, 1 3-inch anti-aircraft gun, and 12 torpedo tubes. She carried a crew of 185 sailors under the command of Lieutenant Joshua Nix, a 33-year-old officer known for his steady nerves and innovative tactical thinking. What the ship lacked in raw firepower, she made up for in experience. Having served extensively in the Mediterranean, China, and the Philippines in peacetime, Edsall had already distinguished herself in the early days of the Pacific War, becoming the first American destroyer to sink a Japanese submarine when she helped send I-124 to the bottom off Darwin on January 20, 1942. But by February, the old destroyer had suffered damage from one of her own depth charges that exploded prematurely during an anti-submarine attack. The structural strain from that incident would soon be tested far beyond what her designers ever imagined possible. On February 27, 1942, Edsall and her sister ship USS Whipple were escorting the converted aircraft tender USS Langley, which carried precious P-40E Warhawk fighters desperately needed for the defense of Java. When Japanese bombers attacked and damaged Langley beyond repair, Edsall took aboard 177 survivors, including Army Air Force pilots. The following day, Edsall transferred these survivors to the oiler USS Pecos near Christmas Island. But on March 1st, after completing the transfer, Lieutenant Nix received orders to return to Cilacap, the last Allied port on Java's southern coast. What Nix didn't know was that Vice Admiral Nagumo's 1st Carrier Strike Force, the same armada that had devastated Pearl Harbor, was lurking nearby. This force included the carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, escorted by the battleships Hiei and Kirishima, heavy cruisers Tone and Chikuma, and a screen of destroyers. At 1550 hours on March 1st, a Japanese scout plane from the carrier Akagi spotted what they mistakenly identified as an American light cruiser. When Vice Admiral Nagumo received the sighting report, he was incensed to find an American warship so close to his fleet. He immediately ordered the battleships Hiei and Kirishima, along with cruisers Tone and Chikuma, to intercept and destroy the intruder. At approximately 1600 hours, lookouts aboard Edsall spotted the masts of Japanese warships on the horizon. Lieutenant Nix quickly assessed his options, and they were grim. The mathematics of combat told a story of certain annihilation. The battleships Hiei and Kirishima each carried 8 14-inch guns that could hurl 1,400-pound shells over 25,000 yards. The heavy cruisers Tone and Chikuma added 16 8-inch guns to the equation. Edsall's puny 4-inch guns could barely reach 15,000 yards. The firepower ratio was approximately 50-1 in favor of the Japanese. Nix faced the ultimate command decision: surrender to overwhelming force or fight against impossible odds. With no friendly forces within 1,000 miles, running was futile. Surrender would place his men at the mercy of forces who had already demonstrated brutality toward prisoners. Instead, Nix chose a third option that would soon become legend. At 16:03 hours, the Japanese heavy cruiser Chikuma opened fire at extreme range. 5 minutes later, the battleships Hiei and Kirishima joined the barrage with their massive 14-inch guns. By all conventional naval doctrine, Edsall should have been obliterated within minutes, but what happened next defied explanation. Lieutenant Nix ordered a series of maneuvers that nobody had ever attempted in combat conditions. He varied his ship's speed unpredictably, from flank speed to dead stop in moments. He ordered radical course changes every 30 seconds, never establishing a pattern the Japanese gunners could predict. He laid smoke screens that momentarily blinded enemy gunners, then emerged from unexpected directions. The Japanese fired salvo after salvo, but couldn't land a hit. The battleship Hiei fired 210 14-inch shells. Kirishima added 87 more. Their secondary batteries contributed another 132 6-inch shells. Not a single one found its mark. Frustrated by the destroyer's elusive movements, Vice Admiral Nagumo ordered aircraft from the carrier Soryu to join the attack. 9 HE-D-3A Val dive bombers screamed down on Edsall, yet her frantic evasive maneuvers spoiled their. For over an hour, the old destroyer performed a deadly dance amid an ocean churning with explosions. Japanese naval officers watched in disbelief as their state-of-the-art fire control systems failed to solve the puzzle of Edsall's movement patterns. What Edsall accomplished that day represents one of the most remarkable feats of seamanship in naval history. Modern analysis suggests that Lieutenant Nix was exploiting principles of naval architecture and physics that wouldn't be fully understood until decades later. By dramatically varying his ship's speed, he created what engineers now call discontinuous tracking profiles, movements so erratic that pre-computer fire control systems simply couldn't calculate a solution fast enough. Each time Japanese fire control officers thought they had the range, Edsall would suddenly accelerate, decelerate, or change course. The G-forces these maneuvers placed on the ship's hull approached structural failure limits. The Clemson-class destroyers were designed for sustained operations at constant speeds with gradual turns, not the violent whipping motions Nix was demanding from his vessel. Radar footage captured from the Japanese cruisers reveals patterns resembling the chaotic movements of a startled mouse, darting, freezing, spinning, and dashing in unpredictable bursts. It was this observation that prompted a Japanese officer to write in his combat log, "Odoru Nezumi," the dancing mouse. In Japanese culture, to bestow a nickname on an enemy represented the highest form of battlefield respect. It acknowledged not just skill, but artistry in combat. The Dancing Mouse was the only American ship to receive such an honor from Japanese forces during the entire Pacific campaign. By 1700 hours, Edsall had been dodging death for over an hour. Her crew was exhausted from the violent maneuvers. The ship's engines were overheating from the constant speed changes. and the Japanese had changed tactics. Vice Admiral Nagumo, infuriated by the failure of his heavy ships, ordered an all-out aerial assault. 26 dive bombers from the carriers Soryu, Hiryu, and Akagi joined the attack in coordinated waves. Lieutenant Nix continued his evasive dance, but the multiple attack angles made perfect evasion impossible. At approximately 17:10 hours, a bomb struck near Edsall's stern, damaging her rudder. With her steering compromised, her dance became less nimble, less unpredictable. The Japanese battleships, spotting the change in movement patterns, adjusted their fire. At 17:18 hours, the battleship Kirishima scored the first hit on Edsall with a 14-inch shell that penetrated her engine room. Steam poured from ruptured pipes, and the destroyer's speed began to falter. More hits followed in rapid succession. By 17:30 hours, Edsall was listing heavily, her guns silent. Smoke billowed from multiple fires. The Japanese vessels were ordered to cease fire, their target finally subdued after one of the most extraordinary displays of combat seamanship in naval history. At 17:31 hours, USS Edsall slipped beneath the waves, her ensign still flying. The Japanese ships, in a rare gesture of respect, dipped their flags in salute before departing the area. In the aftermath of the battle, the fate of Edsall's crew remained a mystery for decades. No distress calls were received. No survivors were recovered by Allied forces. The ship was simply listed as missing in action in naval records. Families received the dreaded telegrams. The Navy Department deeply regrets to inform you that your son is missing in action in the performance of his duty and in the service of his country. What they didn't know, what nobody knew until after the war, was that a small number of survivors had been pulled from the water by the Japanese cruiser Chikuma. Intelligence reports later revealed that approximately 8 to 10 men were rescued, interrogated, and then transferred to Japanese-held territory on March 24, 1942. During war crimes trials, after Japan's surrender, investigators located a mass grave near Kendari 2 airfield on Celebes Island. The remains of 5 Edsall crewmen were found in one grave and a 6th nearby. All had been beheaded. Evidence suggested that 5 more bodies, likely the Army Air Force pilots who had been aboard Edsall, had suffered the same fate. For the 185 Navy personnel and 31 Army Air Force pilots aboard that day, Edsall became not just their ship, but their tomb. And for 8 decades, their final resting place remained undiscovered in the crushing depths of the Indian Ocean. Fast forward to the 2020s, when deep-sea exploration underwent a technological revolution. Autonomous underwater vehicles equipped. Advanced sonar systems could now map the ocean floor with unprecedented precision. Multi-beam echo sounders could detect objects as small as a ship's smokestack at depths exceeding 20,000 feet. Concurrently, previously classified Japanese naval documents became available to researchers, offering new clues about Edsall's final location. Records from the battleship Kirishima provided coordinates for where the ship was believed to have sunk: 13 degrees 45 minutes south, 106 degrees 47 minutes east, approximately 200 miles southeast of Christmas Island. In late 2023, the Royal Australian Navy vessel MV Stoker was conducting hydrographic surveys near Christmas Island when its sonar detected an unusual shape on the seafloor at a depth of approximately 18,000 feet. The object's dimensions matched those of a Clemson-class destroyer. In the following months, a joint Australian-American expedition returned to the site with advanced remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, capable of withstanding the extreme pressures of the deep ocean. These vehicles carried high-definition cameras and specialized lighting systems designed to illuminate the perpetual midnight of the abyss. The first images transmitted back to the surface confirmed what historians had long suspected. The wreck was indeed USS Edsall, sitting upright on the seabed, her hull remarkably intact despite the damage inflicted in her final battle in 8 decades of submersion. The discovery was officially announced on Veterans Day, November 11, 2024, a fitting date to honor the sacrifice of the Dancing Mouse and her crew. The wreck of this ship is a hallowed sight, declared the Chief of Naval Operations, serving as a marker for the 185 U.S. Navy personnel and 31 U.S. Army Air Force pilots aboard at the time, almost all of whom were lost when Edsall succumbed to her battle damage. The discovery of Edsall's wreck has provided new insights into her final battle. ROV footage revealed the entry points of at least 7 14-inch shells concentrated around the engine room and stern, precisely where Japanese records indicated they had finally scored hits. More remarkably, detailed scans of the hull showed evidence of extreme stress patterns consistent with the radical maneuvers described in Japanese accounts. Metal fatigue lines indicated that the ship had indeed been pushed to its structural limits during the battle. Perhaps most poignant was the discovery of the ship's wheel, still locked in what appears to be a hard starboard position. Lieutenant Nix's final command to his vessel as it began its descent to the ocean floor. These findings have vindicated historical accounts of the extraordinary battle and confirmed that the Dancing Mouse maneuvers were not merely legend, but a documented case of combat innovation that pushed both human and mechanical limits beyond what was thought possible. The discovery of USS Edsall answers the questions posed by her legendary last stand. How did one ship execute maneuvers that physics said were impossible? Through the innovative tactical genius of Lieutenant Joshua Nix, who instinctively understood that unpredictability could counterbalance overwhelming firepower. What drove her captain to dance with death for 3 hours? The knowledge that surrender meant certain death for his crew, while resistance, however futile, offered at least the dignity of choice and the slim possibility of survival. And why did the enemy honor the very vessel they had destroyed? Because in the ancient warrior code that still influenced Japanese naval tradition, courage and skill deserved recognition regardless of the flag under which they sailed. The Edsall story transcends mere military history. It speaks to the human capacity for ingenuity under pressure, the leadership qualities that inspire ordinary people to extraordinary actions, and the respect that true warriors, even enemies, can hold for each other. Today, USS Edsall's legacy lives on in multiple dimensions. For military strategists, her tactics have been incorporated into naval warfare doctrine, particularly in asymmetrical combat scenarios. The Edsall maneuver pattern is now taught at the Naval War College as a case study in evasion against superior forces. For the families of her crew, the discovery provides long-awaited closure. Descendants of the Dancing Mouse's sailors finally know the exact location where their grandfathers and great-grandfathers made their ultimate sacrifice. For international relations, the joint Australian-American Discovery Expedition demonstrates the enduring alliance forged in the crucible of World War II, an alliance that continues to ensure stability in the Indo-Pacific region more than 80 years later. And for future generations, the story of the Dancing Mouse offers a timeless lesson that courage, innovation, and determination can allow even the smallest vessel to leave an indelible wake across the ocean of history. Dive deeper into the untold stories of maritime courage with ocean attacks. Subscribe now to join our expedition through history's most remarkable naval encounters. From shipwrecks that changed the course of wars to the technological breakthroughs revealing their secrets today, we're bringing the ocean's hidden narratives to the surface. Hit that. Hit the notification bell and become part of our community of underwater explorers and maritime history enthusiasts.